Uh, Thank you very much, EM, and to the colleagues from the various media houses. Let me start by expanding on the question that was asked by Pedi, which the mayor have responded on it around that why you'll find that you are in the same locality. Part of that area is having water, part doesn't have. Of course, the mayor have indicated that you'll find that in that area, you are getting water from two different sources. In other words, two different systems. I want to also bring to your attention that it will sometimes happen that we are even on one system, but you're not getting water, all of you. The reason being also, we've been embarking on a process of really managing demand for Johannesburg. When the mayor indicated that historically our demand was at about 1,800, you'll recall about just over a year back, we were able to reduce it to 1,700. So what have we done? Of course, above the measure that we do, some of them around closing and so on, we've been embarking on the process of pressure management. And what does it do? We reduce pressure in the specific zone where we know that pressure is high, we have high losses, and so on. And of course, when we reduce pressure, there'll be less flow coming in. And we've been communicating to say that part of the solution from the technical point of view, pressure management is a quick win that needs to be, we need to carry on with it. But the issue is that as we implement that, we also need residents within that also assist us, because when you reduce pressure, less flow, residents in that area will need to assist us by reducing demand. Because if you maintain demand at the same area where it was historically, certainly the system is not going to balance. There will be few people that will struggle, especially high-lying area. So the concept of reducing pressure in this various system which we are working on, it also needs to be supported by the residents within that particular area. And that's where now the issue of water conservation comes in, where we appeal to the resident. And I must say upfront, when we appeal to the residents, of course, our message is directed mainly to those areas where we are supplying water right now. As much as the area that we are struggling, the bigger part of the city we are supplying water. When we say residents must assist us by conserving water, it will help us to be able to stabilize the overall system. And even those that are not getting water, then they'll be able to get. So I'm saying this because sometimes residents think that when we talk about conserving, we are targeting those residents that are struggling to get water, and we end up getting negative feedback. Our message really is targeting to those that are getting water. So on the issue around our infrastructure, indeed, our infrastructure is also contributing. We're not running away from that. And hence, the mayor indicated also that we have work to do on our infrastructure. And it is for that reason that the council in July 2024 approved a turnaround strategy to improve the investment in water infrastructure over the 10-year period. We are in year one of that investment, and we have seen results, of course, from the investment allocation within the city, whereby if you look at the water in the current year, there's a significant investment going to water infrastructure than previously. So it is part of the journey that we want to stabilize the water infrastructure, where we'll be investing about 32 billion over the next 10 years. Part of that will be going to pipe replacement, because our pipe network is contributing to the problem. Hence, we need to be able to make sure that we are replacing pipes at the faster rate. And it is part of the measure work that will happen within the first few years of this strategy. My colleague Nico will deal with the issue of the water tanker. On the issue relating to a question relating to this specific area, there was a question talking about why are we not hearing what is happening in relation to Cell B, in relation to commando system, and so on. Indeed, there's specific work that we are doing. And I'm going to start by responding to the question for commando system. Commando system, indeed, it's an area that a system that really we've been struggling with it for many years. And it's for that reason why where we are, there's a reservoir going up on the tower. And a few kilometers from here, there's a pump station that's going up. Again, few kilometers from here, there's a pipeline, almost 5 kilometers, new pipeline coming into the area. And all this work that we've been doing for the last 2 years or so, we are starting slowly to see them coming on stream. As the mayor indicated, both tower and the reservoir, they are going to be commissioned fully by end of this year. We are currently in the testing and commissioning. We've started using it, but fully to make sure that we hand over to our operation is going to happen by end of this month. And this will help us to stabilize this system. What other things that we've been doing in the up to now, these are really interim measure just to try to make sure that we get water to the community. But this investment that's going in here, or the infrastructure that we are doing, it is what's going to give us a sustainable solution. And we are on track. Of course, other projects relating to commando system, like the pump station, like the bulk line, will be completing them towards end of the year. But of course, we'll be getting benefit already from end of this month from those work that or part of the projects that are going to be completed. On the Cell B really is part of our inner city system. This is our hectare system. We have a pipeline there that we are replacing about 200 meters. Of course, our team have tried to fix that pipeline end of last year, number of times, and we can't be able to get it right anymore. The pipeline is very bad. The only solution is for us to replace the section of 200 meters. And we have contractors already that are on the ground that are busy replacing that, and is the work that's going to be finished before end of March, so that we can be able to stabilize the supply in that particular area. Another issue, of course, around why there was a question to say why the system is struggling. There are a number of issues really that contributes. You've heard us talking about demand. That, of course, when we talk about demand, we're talking about the overall demand across the city. As the mayor indicated, what we are consuming now is about 1,700 megaliters, which the system from our bulk supply cannot be able really to supply us at that rate. We need to reduce that demand down to about 1,550. And that's issue number one, because what happened is that whenever, say, for instance, there is a technical issue in the system, you'll find that the system takes very long time to recover. This is what we are seeing after the incident that happened, which the mayor, some of them referred to them end of January or so, because the system is operating as a stretch level, it takes time to recover simply because the demand or the utilization is at a rate which is much higher than what the system is able to provide. So we need to be making sure that on our side, we deal with the infrastructure issue that contribute to the issue of the losses, and at the same time, we appeal to the residents. So I will ask Nico to deal with the question for water tanker, but we'll also deal with specific work that we are doing in Hestel 2, which is really dealing with the communities around Melville and so on, because there's work that we are doing in that area.
Good morning.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start my brain dump
those 16 trucks are back on the road that we have. So if I give you a breakdown, we have Midrand that has 25 trucks. These are emergency. You've got to separate it from what we do on a day-to-day basis to the informal settlements. That is a totally different number, and it amounts to 60 trucks across the city to all listed informal settlements. So the emergency trucks is Midrand 25, Randburg, which is supplying the Diepsloot area because it's impacted, 5 trucks. Central region is 16. That includes your Alexandria Berea, your commando system, and your South Hill system. The Soweto, we have 15 trucks because as the executive mayor indicated, there are some Soweto systems that are currently low. So we've augmented it, especially to your schools and your clinics. And then the Dip South, currently largely unaffected. We've got 2 trucks there. Zandfontein, which is your Sandton area and precinct, is unaffected. There are no emergency trucks required there. But ours is to ensure flexibility. And yes, we've started off with many inconsistencies in the way we regulate the trucks, but together with our ward councillors who have been very helpful and our customers who have voiced their concerns through the ward councillors, we've put in mechanisms to better control the truck movement. And just to briefly explain that, we indicate each ward that is affected. Each ward gets 2 trucks, and each ward gets a coordinator linked to the councillor. And together that ecosystem works better in terms of communication. So we've just started it when we had the Midrand crisis. It worked very well. The feedback from the councillors was positive. We are now duplicating that model into the other areas. We definitely want to do that in the central and improve on it. The central is the most affected area currently, and we're going to be bringing trucks from areas that are recovering into this area of struggle. But as the MD indicated, the water system is dynamic, so it varies from system to system as to when they get affected. On a lighter note, when you go to a doctor, the first thing, whether you have a flu or not, he will check your blood pressure, right? That's the same with the water system. You've got to manage the pressure to reduce the losses. And that is why the MD spoke a lot about pressure management. That is our focus. All of these interventions is a progressive realization. It's a 32 billion rand backlog over the next 5 to 10 years. So we need to be given that space to be able to implement. But as we stand now, the immediate effect to the customers is no water. And with the resources we have and what we are augmenting, we are trying to respond to the situation. I think I've covered that, Maya and MD. Thank you very much. Oh, on the Hurst Hill. So the Hurst Hill has a trajectory of issues from dating back as far back as the 19th of January. But I just want to put a timeline to this. The Hurst Hill 2 supplies your affected areas like your West Dean and your Melville areas, which were the first 2 affected areas, and your Parktown West. Now, in your recent days, in the last week, it expanded into Emerentia, Auckland Park, and other areas. So in our investigations from the 19th, we have had erratic water supply into the commando system, impacted by the greater issues that the MD spoke about, starting way back as the issues on the Palmit system. So it impacts, and remember the MD said that the first impacted system is the commando system due to its sensitivity. Now for us to do troubleshooting, we need a fully pressurized system. And in all the incidents we've had to date, we have had interruptions of supply into the commando system. But we have probably done interventions like checking pressure logs on the main supply line into Hurst Hill 1 and Hurst Hill 2. We continue to do that. The latest intervention was last night. We're continuing this morning. We will not leave those interventions until the problem is solved. But the dependency factor is ensuring that we are also able to stabilize supply into the commando system, pressurize it so that all the ancillary parts of the commander system, i.e. Crosby, Brixton, Hursthill 1 and 2, get pressurized. So we're able to test and see where the problem lies. So to answer you transparently, we haven't found the absolute root cause, but we are on track to finding it. In the interim, we will ensure that we provide alternative water. And I did say we want to augment and increase our water tanking into the areas like Emerentia was done yesterday. We want to continue with that today so that we offer relief to the customers that are finding struggle currently. Thank you.
Um, Thank you. I'm going to take MMC Sabaila. I'm going to take the last round of questions of Tacha. Please just raise your voice.
Spoke earlier about the issue of messaging, but from what the residents are saying is that it's not only messaging, but the inquiries about the extent of the problem. Are you being honest to the residents about what's actually happening? Earlier you said that you getting one of the reservoirs to determine what the issue, the extent, to understand the gravity of the situation. Does that mean that this far you've not had an understanding of the situation, the extent of the problem? Because the residents are saying that you are putting band-aid solutions to deeper problems and not fixing the cause of those problems. And lastly, do you not think it's time to perhaps get help from outside, whether it's engineers or private public partnerships? Do you have capacity as a city, as well as water, to resolve these issues once and for all by yourself, or do you think it's time to get help?
Any other question? My lady there.
Two questions, one for Mayor and also one for MP. Mayor, in terms of the questions around communication, you were asking for the media to give help. The first step to that would be that the councillors need to have information, and that is accurate information given to them as a first start. Why is it that our councillors and many councillors across the city keep telling us that they are getting the information at the same time that we are? And why is it that they aren't efficient in the kind of information you're talking about, especially if by area you have that information? Why is it that councillors are not kept abreast with this? And also, in terms of this question about consumers and it being a consumer issue, a year and a half ago, we had a press conference right here in front of the Brixton reservoir that is still in construction. That is exactly where you started that press conference as well. How do we then make a distinction between the consumer issue and the leaks issue, and the leaks issue that has increased over time? Surely we can't continue to say to people that are more and more experiencing that they don't have water. I live in an area where there's struggling every day, even on an ordinary day, besides the fact that we haven't had water now fully for 23 days. So the consumption thing does not hold up when you're also dealing with up to 40% leaks. So how do we make a distinction between those? And then for directly, also just on the issue of the infrastructure and the ring fencing, all of those questions have still not been answered sufficiently in terms of how do we make sure that there's going to be an infrastructure plan that is actually realized. Again, a year and a half ago, we were hearing very similar things. In the interim, we've heard about more money that's been brought into the system through loans. We're hearing about the ring fencing, but we are not given any kind of certainty that we're actually going to see a substantive change in terms of the infrastructure. Is there something that we are missing as to why the infrastructure progress is as slow as it is?
Tony.
I think the mayor just, do we know what the reason was for the strike from a Joburg water, city of Joburg point of view, why there was that strike? And also, isn't the provision of water, could it be considered an essential service? So why would people allowed to go on strike? And then on the Rand water, can we just get clarity? I think the mayor mentioned something about Rand water and pumping earlier. Is Rand water not pumping at full capacity at the moment? Just clarity on that. Then we start to Rand water and capacity. And then I think this might be to the MD. Just practically, what does the full commissioning of the Brixton Tower mean? What did it mean for residents? All residents in this area and that are supplied by this tower. Starts not not having these issues. He's been having issues for years now. I mean, we were here a year ago having a difficulty, whatever. So just practical what does that mean? And also maybe is there sort of a timeline for when things start to change? Because at this point, given the rate that we're seeing over, it seems things are getting worse rather than getting better. So is there a point when things will start?
Enzo.
Just for clarity there, you said it will take about 500 million to refurbish the reservoirs, and you were expecting 1.7 billion from the budget. Just for clarity.
Sikona.
Mayor, my first question wasn't answered about the water sharing. Because you started off the press by urging people to use water spray. People don't even have the water to spray this water. Are we facing a situation where we're going to say, in this area, there will be water, in that area, at such and such a time, there will be water? And then my second question, Mayor, is for you. Should the residents of Johannesburg still trust you? Do you think you are still comfortable in this position that you're in right now?
Why do you change your face when you ask the question?
Because I'm asking it to you.
But your face is like, hey. That's fine.
Alex.
So Randwater have told us that they're actually supplying us with less water. They don't use those words. They're saying they're supplying us with what the agreement is, which means that they're actually giving us less water than they were giving us. They've said that on record. When did that start? Was it communicated to you guys? How did that conversation happen? And was it communicated to residents? And then, sorry, interestingly, I just want to chat to you. I asked people at the protest if they knew who the NMC was, and nobody knew your name. Do you have a message for them? Thank you so much.
Buena.
So this is a very important year. We're going to open elections in April. And the city of Joburg is starting its very important as we can raise water. So residents have been expressed frustration and calling for change. Can the mayor admit whether or not this reflects well on the majority party government's ability? And do you guys still believe that you guys can restore confidence by the time the local elections are out?
The gentleman there.
William Jacobs from Hexton. How do you plan to rebuild public trust after repeated service delivery failures? And second question is that
You said your name is?
William Jacobs. When will the residents of Melbourne, Richmond, Westby, and suppliers and surrounding areas in expect reliable water supply?
Buena.
Has the mayor had water?
The gentleman in an orange t-shirt there.
It's Henrik from African Times. Mayor mentioned that there are incidents where residents take very good infrastructure, like legal informal settlements, building on top of city infrastructure. Can you please just shed light on what you're doing to address that? The general at the bank also mentioned that you secured about 60 water tankers. Can you also just confirm when they're going to go? Thank you.
Any further questions? The mayor won't be able to do any one-on-one, so if you have questions, can you please just raise them here so that we can cover all grounds?
Okay. No.
Sorry, again on the rate voice up, there's a lot of attendance, but I know Greg gets it and you know, the other municipalities. But is the city of Joburg prepared to have a situation where people withhold their rates and they did say thank you for those not paying. But what if they also decide that they won't pay now because they're frustrated at that?
Okay. Let's start with the question here in relation to fitness to hold the job. When the water crisis immediately broke down, I was in Midrand in person, confronting communities that had problems, engaged with communities, engaged with Rand Water, engaged with Joburg Water, so that the solutions are found. Today we have seen an increase in Midrand, which demonstrates the fact that this mayoral committee has taken concerns of the issue and confronted the issue. They didn't choose to sit at home when communities are affected. Now, I'm still fit to hold the job. And over and above the water business, the number of issues that the city of Joburg has had successes on in terms of service delivery, in terms of infrastructure development that we continue to do. We had been the first city in South Africa to implement a waste to energy alternative technology in Johannesburg. We've been able to successfully raise the 1.6 grant from national infrastructure plus another 550 million from the Netherlands government, which gives us about 2.1 billion, and the city will also be putting about 400 million of its own money into that project. Why we're doing it? We want to get rid of landfills. So water is one area of work that we're doing. Yes, it has set historical challenges and historical backlogs that we must continue to address. And in this term, we will be doing this work. In this area alone, Region B, we've invested just around 800 million as part of dealing with the infrastructure backlog in the area of Region B. So there's work that's being done. It's just unfortunate that the reservoir from rainwater collapsed at a point where it was in January when people were consuming water and needed water, and it affected a wide range of areas. Hestel 1 and Hestel 2 also affected this particular area. But what I'm encouraged about is that Joburg Water is currently at the point where they are refurbishing Hestel 1 and Hestel 2 with the aim of ensuring that into the future we do not experience such bigger problems as and when our systems collapse. But yes, I am fit to keep the job. I am fit to continue to do this task, Kwena. Yes, it does reflect as and when there's service delivery challenges. It reflects on the party that is leading government because then it says you are not responding. But as and when government is responding, it then demonstrates that yes, that party is doing something in as far as responding to its challenges and responsibilities. And that's exactly what we are doing. But it is important, Gwena, to put into context the water challenges in terms of infrastructure. We need a huge amount of money. Joburg is growing daily. We're experiencing an influx of about 10,000 people month to month coming to settle in Johannesburg. Some don't even know where they're going to sit. And that is why we are seeing a mushrooming of informal settlements. So it's a challenge that will continue to have as government of Johannesburg. And that is why we have a housing backlog of just over 300,000 because of the influx. And the challenges will continue to be there in Johannesburg. But fortunately, whilst there are challenges, there's also positive. We know that our economy has shown an increase. We still maintain Johannesburg contributing the highest, even above national or sovereign, at about 2% in terms of our GDP contribution. So it's an important thing to also note that there are positives. We've been able to hold successful events, the G20 being one of them, and month end we'll be hosting Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs, an important event that demonstrates the capacity of our infrastructure to host big events in Joburg. Yes, it does reflect on a governing party as and when there are particular service challenges, but the ability to respond will help us to deal with what was called public trust. I think it's Wayden who asked that thing, but going to communities helps us to deal with public trust because we give an honest account of what has actually happened. We cannot hide and say the system did not collapse and give reasons that are not there. At Klipfontein, it affected the Midrand area. There's a problem at Hestel 1 and Hestel 2, which affected the supply. We are doing something to get the supply on. Yes, it's an essential service to a large extent, water supply, and that is why we had to confront the employees, engage with them, and avert a possible strike. Would have been an illegal strike. We did issue a statement. We did issue a letter to the employees that their strike will be deemed illegal. But we are happy that management and the workers were able to find an amicable solution to the challenge that we already have. I think the rest of the questions I'd love to leave them to, I think they belong to the MD. Let me just talk about what we are doing on pipe replacement. We are accounting for about just over 12,000 kilometers of our water infrastructure, or pipe infrastructure. Just in the CBD of Johannesburg, we are counting just over 150 kilometers, which requires an entire replacement, just the CBD, which, if we have to look at the costs associated, will probably be between 3 to 4 billion, just focusing on the CBD of Johannesburg. And that's the money that we must continue to budget and money must continue to raise. Now, when I said we've got 1.7 billion is what we have invested in terms of our budget for 2025, 2026. And in 2026, 2027, we hope to increase our allocation to Joburg Water to focus of infrastructure. But we also raise money from financial institutions in terms of borrowings so that we can support our infrastructure. Our infrastructure, or rather our capital expenditure in this financial year, was at just around 8 billion. Part of it is water, electricity, roads, etc., etc. So we'll have to continue to increase. We're hoping that this next financial year we can increase our expenditure, capital expenditure budget to just around 10 billion. In that way, it helps us to catch up much faster with the backlog that we are faced with. MD, the tankers, yes, we have bought tankers. 19 are there, they're working. We are deploying. The idea was to get out of the water tanker environment, as you know. This financial year, we have the 19. The next financial year, we'll buy another 20. And in the outer year of 2027, 2028, remember, water tankers are not on a permanent basis, as and when there's a particular intervention and a particular number is basically to service your informal settlements. And in the informal settlements, we are working with vets as part of a partnership to also drill boreholes so that we create an alternative a supply of water so that we can get rid of water tankers. The program is going well. It has been tested at Pumla Mkashi, so we are working on that particular program. No, naki arabile tsak. Khosotefe.
Whether we need help from this.
Let me talk about that. We do work with Water, which is outside of us, in terms of capacity, knowledge, and exchange of information. Over and above, we've got contractors, we've got engineers that we also commission on particular work that we are doing. In terms of national government, yes, as part of the district development model, also constantly engaging with national government, and that is why National Treasury currently we are undergoing service entities reforms, Joburg Water being one of them, to try and resolve some of the things. Yes, we do need help, and hence the city talks about creation of partnerships, whether with stakeholders. You'd know that in different areas we do invite stakeholders from outside, especially those that are in Joburg, because they are Joburgers themselves. The success of Joburg is for all of us to benefit from. And that is why we will always welcome the support of stakeholders.
What was the reason for the strike? Because we're hearing a lot of voices.
No. The strike was in relation to the allocation of bonuses for last year in November, and there was particular reductions based on the scores and all the issues. And workers felt that they did not get what was due to them, and the management has to go through a process to also explain. Remember, when you go into a bonus situation, you may be aiming for 100%, but with the evaluation and assessment, you end up at 60%, and then they calculate what is the actual amount for that 60%. But the matter has been handled by management, and we are happy that workers are back at work. MD and the MMC will deal with the last ones.
A question relating to the communication to councillors. We do communicate with councillors on frequent basis, and that communication comes through in many forms. We have WhatsApp groups with councillors per area or per region. That, of course, whenever there are issues that we need to update that council, we use those channels. Moreover, whenever we are experiencing serious challenges like this, we do call meeting frequently with councillors. And as we call those meetings, we end up agreeing with them as to how frequent we should meet so that we can keep them informed. The issue here, of course, that we may need to look at and say, how do we improve with water system? Sometimes you find that we are still investigating what the issue is. And I'm sure that's where the gap is created between us and the councillor, where councillor feels that we are not coming forward fast enough. And so it's the issue that we need to look at it and say, how do we really bring them on board much earlier, even though we're still looking at the issue to say, what is it that we are dealing with? Rather than only start talking to them when we are certain the issue that we are dealing with. But communication do happen. Of course, there may be a way of improving it. On the issue around the balance or the difference between the leaks and the consumption that we talk about for residents, I think one thing that must be understood, when we talk about consumption, we are not by any way blaming residents for the entire challenges that are there. But what we are saying is that these challenges that we have for the water supply in Johannesburg need various solutions at the same time. Infrastructure only, it cannot be the only solution, because of course in the infrastructure there are certain activity that you can be able to do in the short to medium term, but in the main infrastructure it's a long-term initiative. So while we are busy with the infrastructure issue on the short term, whether it's pressure management, whether the issue of say how do we respond to leaks whenever they happen through capacitating our teams and so on, the bulk supply or where we find that the reservoirs are very
manufacturing plants, all of that, to the plants, all of that, to the big companies. Have you got a specific strategy around their water consumption?
Indeed, we are engaging with by City of Johannesburg, whereby we are supplying them from an alternative source, similar to what we are doing in informal settlements, where we should be commissioning 9 localized water supply scheme by end of March at various informal settlements. So there's various things that we are doing around that. So the ring fencing. Work is happening around that, and it is championed under the presidential working group, as well as the National Treasury program for trading service reform. Of course, right now we're still working on the modality around it, because as you know, as much as the stream of revenue for the city, therefore, rates, water, electricity, and solid waste, the activity that the city handles is much more than those. So what is being done right now is the whole model, as to say, as we go into ring fencing, say, for instance, of water resources, so that we can invest much more of that resource back to water. What is it, the component that we need to contribute as a dividend to the overall functionality of the city, and how do we using the system, agreeing on how the system must be balanced and so on. And they do give us reports on daily basis in terms of how their system is functioning, and as to whether are they pumping at full capacity or not. And the issue relating to a question, Alex, that you asked, to say rainwater indicated that they are supplying less. So the issue, the communication that we received from rainwater, of course, it was indicating that they were highlighting the challenge that we are consuming at a rate of 1,700 megaliters more, which is more than 1,500. And in that challenge, they were saying to us, what is it that we are going to be doing, and doing it at a faster pace, so that we can be able to stabilize the system, because the system is struggling. And at this point, as far as we know, they haven't deliberately said they are going to supply Johannesburg less. But what they do, of course, they do balance their system at the back, which means if they need more water in Palmit because of other challenges that were happening in Midrand, they'll take water from Ekenhof and take it to Palmit, so that Palmit, Midrand can be able to be stable all the way going to Tshwane and Ekurhuleni. That, of course, will have impact in Ekenhof, because we'll end up losing Ekenhof. So it's an issue that they do ongoing for balancing the system on their part. But of course, there are those communication between us and them to say, what is it that we are going to do on our side as well to assist in reducing the consumption or the demand on our side, so that their system can be able to balance.
So you knew that they were going to give you less water, because they are giving you less water. They're just not using that word. They've said that they're giving you what we are allocated versus what they were giving us, which is over and above what they were allocated.
Okay. What we are aware of, Alex, is that when there's a need on their part to move the load from one system to another, because of the challenges that they may be having on other systems, they do that. They haven't officially informed us that they are going to be bringing less water in Johannesburg from now on going forward. That we are hearing from you now. The communication that I've received doesn't say that. That communication highlights the challenge that the current consumption is higher than the level that they can be able to supply, and as a result, what is it that we are doing? But of course, the issue that I've indicated, that whenever they are challenged, there is that flexibility on their side where they move load from one system to another. But of course, the system where the load is being taken from, that system will end up struggling, like what's happening right now in the commando system in Crown Gardens, because there was an issue of moving the load to Palmit with the view of getting the Palmit back. So the final question that I want to answer, which was more talking about the outlook. What is the outlook? Is the situation going to get worse? So we on daily basis, our aim is to stabilize this system. And how do you stabilize the system? We can only stabilize the system by making sure that the reservoir can start improving the levels. And in this, I'm not talking about our reservoir only. Our interest also is to make sure that our back supply reserve improves and get to 60%. Because it is when the system overall is at 60% that there won't be any area that struggles with supply of water across the city. Thanks. MMC.
Oh, no. And next one to me to appear on TV. No. Thanks, Alex. I think we, and good morning to yourselves and residents out there. This is MMC Jack Squaila. We normally attend to community, issues as and when it comes. You'll remember on Ivory late last year, we did spend most of our times there. When the system December, we didn't enjoy our December because of this water crisis. Around Orange Farm, the same. People think that it's only here. I think I did spend most of my 2 weeks in Orange Farm, District 3, 4, and 5. I met councillors all the time to discuss solutions and interventions there. For instance, the time of coronation, you would have seen me in most of these community meetings. In one of the meetings, we were taken out by Inyalas, escorted by police out because of the frustration of residents. And I must indicate that there is indeed in areas where we pick up the interruptions because of residents temporary. We challenged EM where you went last week at Naledi. Our guys, when they went on site, I think together with one of the residents, to discover that the PRV, which was half closed, could be identified by a resident. It means that it would have been tampered to. We normally use those PRVs to actually deal with pressure. For the fact that, in fact, was actually identified last week, after opening it full scale, then water was back in that particular section of Soweto. And we must indicate what the MDF said around the borehole schemes. Why are we spending time in Orange Farm? There is also an issue of a load that is happening in our reservoirs there. 37 megaliter is very small compared to the load, the whole entire Orange Farm. Now, with the discussion around the borehole scheme, which our team at Jobe would have moved with speed, around 32 already done. Others 9 that MD spoke about, we are now equipping them, meaning that we are putting the pumps, the tanking, the purification system, and so on, the testing of water, and ensure that when residents drink that water, is actually purified, there won't be actually setbacks and so on. But in that particular section of Orange Farm, a large part of Loli, Kokotela, we think that this borehole scheme will reduce load in our own reservoirs and actually assist in saving the infrastructure from collapsing. We are looking at actually moving away from tankering system, as the EMS said. One is procuring ourselves, as I said. Number 2 is to use borehole schemes in areas where there is high consumption of water and there's no revenue generation. So we use this borehole scheme to actually take this resident off the grid, but in the meantime, providing them with alternative water. I just felt that I must just touch on that, but most of the issues were touched. But I must indicate, EM, lastly, that we are experiencing a situation where certain politicians are using this crisis for the political games. We think it's wrong. This is a real crisis. We are glad if you listen to Deputy Minister Matlobo today speaking, there's acknowledgement that indeed everybody from government, local government, provincial and national must come at play to try and intervene so that at least we rescue residents from this problem. But we mustn't use this problem to say that let me go and use this problem to campaign for myself. I think it's reckless and irresponsible. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, MMC. Members of the media, colleagues, thank you so much for coming to the media briefing. Thank you.
Alex, goodbye. Goodbye.